Have you ever stepped into a space and felt like it wasn't quite right for you? Not in a dramatic movie explosion sort of way, no fiery helicopters crashing through the ceiling, but that quiet nagging feeling of being out of place, like a puzzle piece that just doesn't fit. For me, it is personal. Let me take you back to when I was 10, sitting in a school assembly. The bright fluorescent lights above me didn't just shine. They stabbed into my eyes like tiny needles, giving me a headache that clung to me all day. The sounds of kids' chatter and the scraping of chairs moving, they weren't just noise. They were like a wave crashing over me again and again, one that I couldn't get out of. At home, I craved silence, but it wasn't restful. It was like a constant high-pitched ringing in my ears, like a phone call that just wouldn't end. And then there's the small stuff, the things that people usually shrug off, like wet socks on a rainy day. These made my teeth clench as if I was biting into aluminum foil. And having to throw trash down the chute, my mind would whisper, germs, 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 until I scrubbed it all off in the shower. I tried to explain this to people, but most times they'll look at me and say, you're just too sensitive. And for the longest time, I believed them. I thought I was the problem. Too fragile, too fussy, too me. But here's the thing. What if I told you that the problem isn't people like me? What if the issue isn't that I'm too sensitive, but that the world wasn't built for people like me at all? Now today, I am going to pull back the curtains and show you the hidden barriers that you might not see, but we do, and show you how we can build a world that lifts us up higher together. So let's try a little experiment, shall we? Picture Singapore with no lifts and escalators, just ladders. Think of MRT stations with ladders. Think of HDB blocks with ladders. And Orchard Road with, you guessed it, ladders. Now, if someone came up to you and said, oof, I can't climb these ladders, my legs won't let me. Would you cross your arms, judge them and say, sorry, that's your issue? Of course not. We'd pause, take a step back, and ask ourselves, why did they build it like this in the first place? And how can we make it work for everyone? Now that's the heartbeat of the social model of disability. It flips the script. It says the problem isn't what's wrong with us, it is how we design our surroundings. In the Asia Pacific, there are 700 million people with disabilities. That's half the world's total. Here in Singapore, we have about 3%. That's about 110,000 people who navigate these challenges every day. Now think about it. A wheelchair user isn't disabled because they can't walk. A wheelchair user is disabled because there is no flat surface or a ramp to roll up on. A blind person isn't disabled because they can't see. A blind person is disabled because there is no braille on the sign, no audio cues to guide them, and no alternative ways to help them navigate through the path. And me, I don't struggle because I'm too sensitive. I struggle because the world is built for people who don't feel lights like needles or hear sounds like storms. So the problem isn't the person. The problem is the design. And when we ignore that, we create everyday failures, tiny cracks in the system that turn into canyons for some of us, often in ways that you might not even notice. So, what happens when the space doesn't fit everyone? I've lived it, and perhaps some of you might have glimpsed into it, even if you didn't know what you were seeing. Back in school, the bright lights and the noisy canteens made my head spin. I'd ask the teachers for a break, and they often tell me, just try harder. But I'd see it now with the kids that I work with, some with ADHD, some autistic, all brilliant in their own ways. There's this boy who fidgets constantly in his seat, not because he's restless, but because the room's hum and chatter have nowhere else to go. No quiet corner for him to recharge. And then there's this girl who pauses during group work, not because she is lost, but because the pace slams into her like a tidal wave. Now, it's bigger than the classrooms, though. In East Asia and the Pacific, 43 million children with disabilities miss out on school. Not because they can't learn, but because the path to get there doesn't exist. Now, here in Singapore, about 1 in 150 children are autistic, and the numbers are climbing. Yet, only about 33% of working-age persons with disabilities have jobs. Why? Now, let's zoom in on how this plays out in real life. Now, picture an autistic riding the MRT home from Jurong East. All of a sudden, the train breaks down. Announcements blare through the speakers, overlapping. There are no clear signs, just a wall of noise. Now, what would have been a simple trip back home turns into an impossible maze, a sensory overload with no escape hatch. Or picture a wheelchair user riding the MRT home, only to arrive at their stop to find out that the lift has broken down. There are no ramps nearby, and they're not allowed to use the escalator. They're stuck, paused, waiting for someone to come and help them. But why should they need a hero to come and save them? And here's one I've seen, a ramp, glistening and new, but it is so steep that it might as well be a water slide. Someone built it with accessibility in mind, checked the box, but they forgot about the people that actually need to use it. Now, across ASEAN, some stats say that there is only about 1% of people with disabilities, but if we dig a little deeper, you would know that there is about 100 million people. Now, we miss out on so much potential because we rely on the notion that someone will help, instead of asking, how can we make help unnecessary in the first place? Because accessibility isn't about charity. Accessibility is about options, not obstacles, and independence isn't a form of privilege. In fact, independence is a form of basic right. And right now, we're letting it slip through our fingers. So that is why education is where we start, especially in Singapore, where education is our launchpad. Now, if we create classrooms that welcomes everyone, we don't just help a few, we make everyone stronger. Now, imagine if schools treated accessibility as a core design principle instead of a last-minute patch. Children wouldn't grow up feeling like they're the problem, taking this weight into adulthood. Now, imagine if schools had adjustable lights that you can dim so that children like me wouldn't have to wrestle with a headache all day. Quiet corners tucked away for when the buzz gets too heavy, or having open spaces for those that learn better when they move. Teachers trained not just in math and science, but to spot for sensory needs or neurodivergent strengths, so that no child has to ever hear, just try harder. I see it now, and it's not just a fantasy. Some schools here are already doing it. Some schools have tweaked lighting, and focus improves, not just for some, but for everyone. In the US, quiet corners help autistic children cope. And when they do, they don't just settle down, they shine. In Vietnam, even though inclusive schools are few, but where they are, children soar. Test score climbs, confidence blooms. Now, I see myself in the children that I work with, and I found my own way. I have headphones and earplugs to drown out the noise and to make it softer for me. I have dark glasses to soften the glare, but not everyone stumbles onto these fixes. In Singapore, about 5 to 6% of children born today here have developmental challenges. We're getting quicker and better at spotting it early, but we now need to build for it. So the question isn't, how can we help children with disabilities? That question is too vague. The question that we should be asking is, how can we design education that works for everyone right from the start? Because when we do, we're not just fixing a flaw. We're unlocking potential that we never knew existed in the first place. So this is where it gets exciting for all of you, the youth of today. You're the ones who can create a world where everyone can stand tall side by side. Now in schools, picture flexible spaces, quiet corners, adjustable lightings as common as desks and chairs. In MRTs and buses, imagine options baked in. Lifts may break down, but ramps and clear signs keep us moving. In workspaces, accessibility should be as standard as Wi-Fi and aircon, not because it is kind, but because it is smart. Now, this isn't just for some people. The ramps at Tampines Mall doesn't just lift your mother and her shopping trolley. It also helps your friend who has a sprained ankle or your neighbor who is a wheelchair user. In Asia Pacific, inclusive ideas can unlock millions of dreams, ours included, and you're the key. The next time you're at a community event, toss out this question. How does this event include everyone? When you're using a website or an app, pause and ask yourself, can a blind person use this? Does this app speak to a screen reader? Now, these aren't big moves. They're quick, quiet sparks that open doors. Because true inclusion isn't about offering a hand to help someone over the wall. True inclusion is about tearing that wall down, or better yet, creating a world where the wall never existed in the first place. So, here's my challenge to all of you. The next time you see a lift, a ramp, or a quiet corner, pause and ask yourself, does this lift everyone, or can we do more? Now take that question into your schools, your neighborhoods, your tomorrows. Because when we create a world that welcomes everyone, we don't just lift those that struggle, we lift every single one of us up higher. Thank you.